Jesus, you are the light of the world. You're the light.
The first part I want to talk about is, if you're going to be a teacher, you must prepare yourself. So the first part we talk about is prepare yourself. And then in the second hour, we'll talk about presenting yourself. You can't present what you have not prepared. So if you are prepared, you then can present. So when we talk about teaching, we're talking about first preparing yourself. So if you are not a good student, you're not going to be a good teacher. So in order to be a good teacher, you must first become a good student. And if you're going to be a good student, you must subscribe to good student strategies. You must discover a strategic design, subscribe to that, and consistently follow that. Often we find a good strategy and we find ourselves wandering away from it. Okay? So we want to go through this and talk about some things. First thing you need to do, because teaching is a mental involvement, it's a mental participation. So you need to get in the habit. And by the way, the things that I'm going to be sharing with you, they are not things that you ought to consider just to be a teacher. But they really ought to become a way of life, a lifestyle. So in general, the things that we're going to be talking about would be good for you to instill them into your children so that from an early age they become good students, even in school, Bible school, etc., etc. So the concepts are very helpful wherever you are if you're going to rise to the top of your game. Okay? So you got to feed your mind. Get in the habit of feeding your mind. Feeding your mind. If you're going to do that, you got to learn to read. Read. Some people hate reading. It has been said, if you want to hide something from people, put it in a book. That's sad. That's really sad. They are generally able to determine the academic progression of a student based upon whether they read. Because you're not going to get too far, because people are not going to tell you that much. So get in the habit of reading. Reading, I cannot overemphasize the value of reading. When I was in school at Freed Hardeman years ago, one of my instructors said, I read 37 books a year. And I thought, oh my goodness. On top of his full-time preaching, full-time instructor, how do you find time to read 37 plus books per year? He said, every place I sit, I have a book. So when I sit, I pick up the book, read a chapter or two. Everybody take your deep breath. I don't want you to pass out. Can I tell you something? You promise you won't tell anybody? I attempted to follow that design. I read on the average of 2 books per year while I'm sitting in the bathroom.
Yes, sir.
Just put a book wherever you sit, read it. Read a page or two, a chapter or two. So place a book everywhere. Read quality materials in addition to light materials for relaxation, etc. Get in the habit of reading. Reading. Learn to reward your students and your children for reading. Then read well. Learn to read for comprehension. Brethren who read Scripture, read the Scripture well. Don't get up on Sunday morning and read like you have never seen that verse before. Read it well. Don't be up there hesitating and stumbling over the words. Get up and read it. Develop the ability to read. All right? Always be open to learning. Read self-help books. There's books, as much information as there is on the internet. There is no reason to be unaware of almost anything you need to know. Surround yourself with encouraging friends and colleagues, people who push you in a positive direction. You need to push people to do better. And you need people in your life who push you. If you've ever worked with a trainer, a physical trainer, they're yelling and screaming at you, 2 more, 2 more, come on, you can do 2 more. You need people who are doing that when it comes to your intellectual and academic progression. If you don't have people who do that, then you're never going to get the maximum output. So you need people. So who are the people who push you? Who are the people who aggravate you to do better? Who are the people you aggravate? Sometimes people ask me when they sign up for life coaching, I say, make sure you know what you're doing now, because I will barge into your life at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask for accountability. Because if I'm going to help you, then we can't be half-stepping. So I want to call you, what did you do today? Why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? If you're not going to do what you're supposed to do, stop wasting my time, okay? So you need people who push you. You will reach the maximum by being pushed. Now, some people subscribe to the philosophy, well, let me make up my mind, take my time. That is an excuse. You're not going to get too far. That's just the way it is. People who reach their maximum are push and pull. We'll talk about pull at some point, but there's someone that's a motivator, always driving. Why does the coach yell at his players? He knows why the players yell at each other. You will see a greater intensity on the football field, on the basketball court, than you will in the biology class. Because for some reason we will allow the basketball coach to yell at us, but the biology teacher better be nice. So now you will see the basketball player going beyond, and the biology student falling beneath. Because we do not allow. And it's amazing. We send the signal. We allow the basketball coach to yell at our sons publicly. Take him out the game, make him sit over here on the bench, embarrass him in front of everybody. And then go out to the school and want to jump on the English teacher for giving him a C when he didn't do what he's supposed to do. So what we're doing is sending the signals that sports is more important than academics. So if the biology teacher treated your son the way the basketball coach treats him, you'd call the superintendent and ask for the teacher to be fired. So what message does that send? Also, that sends a message to our sons, and I spend quite a bit of time in schools talking to children. It sends a message to our sons that they are to be catered to outside of sports. Bad message. So surround yourself with encouraging people. Refocus on positive thoughts. Block out negative thoughts. And you can read this when you get a chance and go through it and make your notes, etc., etc. You've got to develop a lifestyle. You've got to develop a system, a process, a procedure to get you where it is you need to be. Listen to podcasts and CDs that offer insights and personal growth and spirituality and positive affirmation. Now, there are more opportunities to listen to things and stuff now than there has ever been. Cell phone, podcast, iPad, probably some other things I don't even know of. But the question is, what am I feeding my brain?
Yes, sir.
And if I'm feeding my brain junk in, junk out. So we've got to begin taking responsibility. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about this, especially in the last session. One of our impediments in the church, we do not give the preacher's sermons a second, third, and fourth hearing.
Amen.
So we only hear it one time. You need to leave church on Sunday morning replaying the sermon. Listen, if Brother Daniel spent a week preparing a sermon, if he gives it to you in 40 minutes, you can't get it in 40 minutes. It took him a week to put it together. And this is your first time hearing it. So unless you hear it the second and the third, there need to be family gatherings where we have some quiet time and we sit down and we replay Sunday's sermon in this house. And your children know that every Tuesday night we listen to the sermon again. And you ask your children some questions, and if they don't have the answer to the question, make them listen to it again. Developing good study habits. Now you understand why he can quote Lil Wayne. But he doesn't know what Alvin said. because the repetition of his hearing. So all of that becomes important. You got to have a second and a third and a fourth hearing, verbally and visually. We got to begin doing that. We have done a terribly poor job in doing that. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about curriculum a little later. Change your internal vibrations by changing the signals that you send out to others. Forgive and be kind to yourself for past mistakes. Apply the principles to others. While you can't change the past, you can change how you feel about yourself and your thoughts going forward. So feed your mind. What are you putting into your mind? What are you putting into your mind? Crucial. What are you putting into your body? What are you putting into your mind? Sometimes people say, well, I'm really not listening to that. I'm really not paying attention to that. It's going into your subconsciousness, and it's impacting you. We'll talk about that later when we talk about how we live out of our subconsciousness. So what are you feeding your mind? You got to take charge of what's going into my mind. If you are diabetic and you have a severe diabetic condition, you better read the label. That's your responsibility to ask. If you are allergic to peanut oil, you better find out what's in this. You can't just stumble through and act as if there's nothing wrong. Feed your mind. Feed your mind. Any questions? Somebody make up a question so we can kind of get the rough edge off and now get comfortable where I am. Somebody just make up a question. See, after the first question, then people start asking questions. That's why people sit in seminars and wait till the end. Time is up, and everybody got questions. Okay, somebody just make up a question. Anybody?
Brother John?
Yes.
I'm really concerned about a teacher teaching for a long period of time and never being able to be relieved or being the burnouts. Is there such a term as that, being overly, when the structure is really not organized to the point where you're being able to teach adequately?
Well, everybody hear his question? Okay. In the university system, a teacher will teach for 30 years. How does that happen? Most academic environments require continuing ed for their teachers. So, though you are teaching, you are being replenished in your sessions. So we got to some type of way design so that teachers can be replenished. Now, there is a such thing as burnout. There is a such thing as a person becoming frustrated and needing a break. And very likely in the Bible school department, that may be a good thing to do, have some type of rotation. That will be determined by who do we have to replace this person, or do we have a replacement, etc. But I would suggest that as a teacher, you need to develop a system whereby you don't suffer burnout. In this sense, you have to see, if teaching becomes frustrating for you, you need to go back and find out why is it frustrating. Why is this frustrating? Why is it frustrating? And fix that problem, even if you do have a break. And I do recommend it's good for people to take a break and be refreshed, etc., etc. But even if a person is teaching, say, Sunday school every Sunday, then you ought to be at least a Wednesday Bible study. So I would not recommend a teacher being out of the teaching environment. The teacher needs to be in some classes, not only because of burnout, but you're missing the information. You're missing the information if you're not there, okay? But in designing your class, your classroom approach, what do I do so that I am refreshed? You need to develop a teaching system so that you are so refreshed that you cannot wait to class time. Okay? Once teaching becomes drudgery, you should have gotten out the week before. Okay, all right, let's talk about strengthening your mind. Your mind is a reservoir of creative potential. just waiting for you to develop and nurture it. Too many people say they aren't creative. I say they either haven't developed their creativity or they are looking at creativity through too narrow a focus. Imagine your mind as a rubber band. As you put creative ideas, dreams, and inspiration into it, your mind stretches and flexes around the new thoughts. As the mind is stretched, it becomes more capable of stretching and flexing, able to accommodate and generate more and greater ideas and creativity. It's like a rubber band. Once it's stretched and stretched, or a balloon, it never goes back to the small size that it had previously. Here's something that you need to do. Memorize. In school, when I was in school, you had to memorize. You had to memorize the preamble to the Constitution. You had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. You had to memorize poems and stand up and say them. I grew up in the Baptist church, and we had youth programs where children got up and said speeches and all of that. You had to memorize those. So there were things that require you to memorize. Things don't require us to memorize now. There was a time you had grandmama's phone number memorized. So now you pick up the phone and say, call grandmama. Yes. Right? What that does is there are not as many memorizations as there were. So you have to replace that. Memorization is crucial and critical. And stop telling people you can't remember. Stop, unless you are 83, don't say that. You do not have to stop remembering because you're 48. Don't buy into the idea that when you get 50, your mind goes bad. Don't tell yourself that. Don't send those negative vibes. There was a gentleman in the community I grew up with, and I visited him. He was 96 years old. He had I don't know how many grandchildren. He knew all of his grandchildren's birthday. He knew their age. And he knew the other children in the community's age based upon where they fit with his grandchildren. We went to church together. He had a grandson that was a year older than I am, and a granddaughter a year younger than I am. So he always knew how old I was. Because he knew I fit between those two grandchildren. So I visited him, and he was 96. I thought he was making fun of me. He was sitting there, and every so often he would uncross his leg, and then he'd cross that. And I'm sitting there, when I cross my leg, I'd pick it up with my hand. I said, is he making fun of me? And then he's sitting here rattling off things that he remembers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, he wasn't making fun of me, but I thought, wow, 96. Man hasn't wavered a bit. Okay? I am saying that how you look at life, what you tell yourself, and how you exercise your mind will make a difference. I mean, you can sit down and let your mind dry up and blow away. That's up to you. But it does not have to happen as rapidly as we allow it to happen. It's just like good stretches. You get in the morning and stretch. You don't have to run 5 miles. But if you will stretch, it will make you feel so much better. Just stretch it. Just stretch it. Notice, animals don't run. They just stretch. The lion gets up in the morning. He does not run for practice. He only runs if there's a gazelle. Yes, every now and then they may play a little bit, but he doesn't run long distances playing. But he does stretch. Yes, sir. He stretches every morning. And it makes it. So you got to learn to stretch. Stretch your mind. Stretch your mind. Begin memorizing things. As long as we've been singing Amazing Grace, you should need a song book. It's a shame for a man to get up with a song book and you've been singing Amazing Grace for 30 years. And got to wait till you find it in the book before we can sing it. That's a shame. Listen, if I went to anything that people have been quoting and saying for 30 years and the people have not memorized it, the first conclusion I would draw is, you don't care anything about that. You don't care anything about that. Oh my goodness. You couldn't possibly care anything about that if you had not memorized the song. I mean, Lil Wayne's song just came out 2 weeks ago and your children got it. Some of you all got it too. It's been on the radar for 30 years. You don't have it. All right. Memorize your credit card, debit card numbers. I was in Tampa at Nassau doing a teacher's workshop about 3 weeks ago. There was a young lady there. She has all of her children's Social Security cards, a number memorized. She has her baby daddy's Social Security number memorized. She has her grandparents. I've never seen, amazing. Huh?
Grandparents?
Yes, she has a grandparent. Everybody in her family just about. She has their Social Security number memorized. She has their medical card number, all that. I mean, it's amazing. Now, here's something I can just about tell you. She's also in school. I can just about tell you. I did not ask her, but I can tell you one thing. She's probably doing well in school because she keeps her mind exercised. Okay? Force yourself to recall what you've read. Challenge yourself to remember larger and larger blocks of data. Refuse to write unimportant data that you can quickly retrieve in memory. Remember more and more information. Rote memory is not real learning, but rote learning does serve to expand one's memory capacity. Force yourself to remember phone numbers. Dial them without looking at the number. Expand your vocabulary. Learn at least one new word each week. Reader's Digest used to have vocabulary builder in there. When you watch Bill O'Reilly, he'll give you a word at the end of his program. Yes, sir.
I have a question in regards to the third paragraph from the bottom. It says, refuse to write unimportant data
Yes.
that you can quickly retrieve.
Yes.
And then above it, it mentions to memorize bank account information and credit cards and your medical cards. That information can be retrieved quickly. Shouldn't you want to free up your mind for things that you're going to use more often? How often are you using your medical card or your...
It's about stretching your memory capacity.
Right.
That's what it's about. Yeah. See, you have to, if you don't memorize some things, you don't develop memorization ability. So memorizing unimportant things, see, it's not like the space in your brain is going to run out.
Right.
So it's not like it's going to be overcrowded. It's the expanding capacity. In other words, the more unimportant things you memorize, they do not interfere with important things. So it's not like if I'm learning some things that's not important, it's going to be a burden or weight on the important things. That's not what's going to happen. Whatever you memorize, it's an expanding our capacity. It's a developing our memorization. It's a lifestyle. It's a system. It's a getting in the habit of disciplining ourselves to memorize. So memorizing things that are not important does not, in other words, it's not that if you memorize, all right, let's say if you memorize something that's not important, it's not going to interfere with you memorizing Amazing Grace. It's not that you only have a certain amount of space in your brain. So if you start memorizing Lil Wayne's song, it's going to push Amazing Grace out. That's not going to happen. So it's about developing a capacity to memorize. Because we use such a small amount of our brain power. We use such a small amount. And so there's great space left. Second page, well, page 3, master the verbs. Verbs are your power words. We're talking about developing, feeding your mind, stretching your mind. And then study. A wise educator once said, studying is the process that is used to decide what to learn, what to remember and recall. Therein, your long-term memory and long-term memory retrieval becomes crucial. Isn't it interesting to note something? When you meet people, if you have some family members that has dementia, or at the beginning of people's failure to remember, it's the short-term memory that goes first. They still remember what happened in 1960. So now watch this, because this speaks to the question that you asked a moment ago. The things that I learned in 1990 did not push what I learned in 1960 out of my mind. Actually, I have a better grip on what I learned back then than I do now. That's generally, so your short-term memory frequently is what people have the greater problem with initially. You can remember things in elementary school. You can remember your elementary school teachers, but you don't remember who visited last Sunday at church. Okay? Study, stretch. Studying does not have to be a difficult process. Ask yourself simple questions. Are you a visual? Do you need to see? Are you auditory? Do you need to hear? Kinesthetic? Are you hands-on learner? What's your learning process? And then you got to get information into those parameters so you can best learn it. You need to know, how do you learn? Now here is a danger though with that. We generally have a tendency to teach others the way we learn. And that's, we'll talk about classroom teaching instruction in a later session, because that's how we tend to do it. If you learn by reading, you're more apt to tell your students, go read it, you'll get it. If you have to learn because someone tell you, you're apt to tell them. And you cannot understand why they didn't get it because you told them. If you're the kind of person who learns by participating with it, you're sitting here saying, shut up, I'll figure it out when I get home. And that's how you expect people to do. You give them a little information and you expect them to go figure it out. If they are people who learn by hearing, they're sitting here saying, you need to tell me how to do this. So you got to take all that in consideration. I actually will give you a handout. There is a handout available, I believe, that will talk about that aspect of teaching. What if you aren't sure what category of learning you fall into? Think back to all of those classes you've taken throughout your academic career. There were forms of learning that came much easier to you than other forms. That's probably your learning style. And you want to develop study skills that are tailored to your unique learning style. That'll help you be much more productive. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do not participate in other learning avenues, but that will help you be much more productive. Now, here's a policy that was in my parents' house when I was growing up. There was no such thing. And by the way, all of the things that I am, see, learning is the same whether it is a scholastic, academic environment, or whether it is a spiritual, biblical environment. The concept is the same. How you learn, etc., etc. So, if you develop good student skills, it'll help you in school, it'll also help you in church. So what you're doing in the Bible school in church is also helping your children in school. So the concepts are the same. So you maximize them, and then you're helping in both categories. I attend a number of high school graduations, something I noticed several years ago. But 7 of the top 10 high school students on any senior class, 7 of the top 10 were actively involved in the church. I noticed that years ago. Look and see if that's true. That tells something. So what we are doing in the Bible school is enhancing what's taking place in the public school. So invest in that. Now, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as a no homework day. When we got off the bus, we had to have in our possession all of our textbooks. If I came home from school and did not bring all of my textbooks, I got a whipping every day. There was no such thing as we don't have any homework in math. No, you will have some homework in math every day. When my parents saw me get off the bus, if I did not have all of my textbooks, I was in serious trouble. You, my friend, was going to have some homework every night. So, if the teacher didn't assign you any math problems, Annie Marshall made you up some math problems and made you do it. That was what took place. Even on Friday. That's some homework. Now you say, oh, I'm telling you, that's just too much. That's too much. See, when you're behind, you got to run faster. I went to segregated elementary schools. Junior high was still segregated. We never got a new textbook except it came from the white school. Academically, our information they was giving us was behind. But because of what my parents did, when I got to college, I wasn't behind. I wasn't behind. So parents have to take an active role in the learning development of your children, and that includes Sunday school. Yes. Now, I didn't grow up in the Church of Christ, but we went to church every Sunday, and either Friday night, and if not on Friday night, at least Saturday night, you had to get your Sunday school lesson. And you had to go over your Sunday school lesson, write down the answers to all of your Sunday school lesson, and then my mama would drill us to make sure you understood that Sunday school lesson. She put the same, and my daddy too, put the same level of intensity in our Bible school learning as they did for school. So there was no division. It was the same. So whatever the information, so you'd sit here for an hour and a half and go over your Sunday school lesson. There was never a week we didn't go over our Sunday school lesson. Never. And they made sure you knew your Sunday school lesson. That was mandatory. I thought everybody did that till I came into the Church of Christ. I'm like, wow. Yeah. I thought everybody did that. So, you've got to develop a system, a process, a design. So there's always something to study at home. Reread your study notes and materials soon after class as possible. See, we've told ourselves that our children need mental breaks, and I'm not suggesting that they don't. But when do children ever sit down and take a mental break? If he takes a break from studying, he watches TV, he gets on the phone, his brain isn't resting. We give them a physical break. Child said, oh, Dad, I'm tired, man. Can I cut the rest of this grass tomorrow? You say, okay. Yes, you can cut the rest of it tomorrow. 5 minutes later, he's soaking sweat playing basketball. He didn't want, now, he wanted a break from this to do something more pleasurable, but he didn't need a break because his muscles were over-exercised. That's not what he needed. So we don't need a break because our brain is over-exercised, and I'm all in favor of changing tracks. You do need to change from one thing to another throughout, etc. But it's not that their brain is overloaded. That's not it at all. So we've got to get serious. We got to get serious. Got to get serious about learning. Let's stop here and take questions. Yes.
Marshall, I'm all in favor of giving, and I often do give homework assignments and Bible school projects, but it seems that a lot of members don't take it as serious as you say. How do we change that mindset?
You whip their parents. That's what the problem is.
I'm talking about adults too.
Embarrass them publicly. No, I'm kidding. We have to change the culture and the climate of our thinking.
Yeah.
If we do not change that, it's not going to change. Our problem, we don't take learning the Bible serious. We just don't. We think that's the preacher's job, to learn it and study it. We got to take it serious. We got to take it serious. Now, you ever realize there are things that God wants you to do, He will never give you that assignment because you are not ready. Can you ever imagine getting to heaven and the Lord tell you all of the things that he really had anticipated blessing you with, but you never put yourself in position to do it? The Hebrew writer said, for when the time you ought to be a teacher. That's stuff I want to tell you. I can't even tell you. That's like a preacher having some sermons. He can't preach to y'all because you ain't ready for them. And we can't teach geometry until you learn mathematics. Let me give you a little 3-minute story about my conversion. I just got through telling you about our parents insisted on academics. I never intended to teach because I hated school. I hated going to school. I didn't like school. I would have dropped out of high school if my dad had let me. Now, I made straight A's, but I didn't like school. I really didn't. I love math, but I really like school. Other than math, I didn't like it. I have a sister that's 3 years older than I am. I have a brother that's 3 years old, and she is. In our household, academics, and my parents didn't graduate from high school. Everybody thought my mother was a school teacher. My mama dropped out of school. Well, her mother died when she was in the 10th grade, so she had to drop out of school and have to take care of her sisters, brothers. Now, her daddy was there, but and then my daddy made it to the 6th grade. So my parents didn't graduate from high school. But they made learning a priority, and they made us learn. So my brother, who was 6 years older than I am, taught my sister his schoolwork. So she went through school 3 grades ahead. My sister taught me her schoolwork, so I went through school 3 grades ahead. When my sister was in the 9th grade, she took grade shorthand. I was in the 6th grade. I learned grade shorthand because whatever my sister was studying, she'd come home at night, she taught me. So I went through school. It was never a challenge, ever. I was so brilliant in math, I've taught many math class for the teacher. Matter of fact, the teacher would get fired letting me teach as much as I did then because I knew math. Teacher would let me grade math papers without a key card because I was good. But it wasn't because I'm smart. It was simply because my parents had a system. So I'm not telling you that because I'm telling you I'm smart. So what I'm saying is I'd always been involved in academics. I was attending Memphis State, majoring in accounting when I was converted. I ain't know anything about y'all. I grew up in the Baptist church and we told the highest. I never went through their conversion procedure, so I always knew I wasn't saved because I didn't even do what they said do to be saved. And I knew I wasn't saved. So I was introduced to a guy and went to his house for a 3-hour Bible study. I liked that. I'd never met anybody who knew the Bible. He sat across the kitchen table. He told me where to turn. He quoted the Bible and explained it. I like that. Man, I like that. See, I could connect with that. And this guy knows what he's talking about. So after a 3-hour Bible study, got him a car and went home. Before I got home, it dawned on me. Everything that man showed me is in the Bible. That ain't gonna change. If there's any changing, it has to be me. Stopped at a payphone to call and tell him I want to be baptized that night. Wow. It was in the day before, call waiting. His son was on the phone, so I couldn't get him until the next night. Now, so then I go to church. Now, in Memphis, where I was converted, people took notes. So it was like another academic environment. I like that. So I took notes. Never thought I'd be preaching. Matter of fact, there has never been a preacher in our family on neither side, my dad and my mother. Never, ever. I'm the only person that has ever been a preacher. As far back as everybody can remember. But I like this. I like the academic environment of the church. People took notes. So I sat in Memphis when you preached. If you didn't use 30 scriptures, you hadn't preached. You had to use some scriptures. My brother David Shanks is somewhere down in this area. Yes, he is. Brother Shanks was preaching in Memphis when I was baptized, so that's enough said. You're going to get some scripture. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay? I wrote down every scripture reference the preacher used on Sunday morning. After I ate dinner, I went over every scripture he had used that Sunday. I never thought I was going to preach. I wasn't into practice. I wasn't doing this to preach. I went over every single scripture, and I had to get the point he made in my head. And if I did not understand something, when I went back on Sunday night, I said, man, listen, I didn't understand that this morning. And I got him to explain it to me. And I did the same thing on Sunday night. Before I went to bed on Sunday night, I went over every scripture the preacher had used. And then the Wednesday night Bible study, I went over every scripture in class. So every week I was learning 3 lessons. I like that. I like that. It's the academic environment. So we've got to create an academic culture and environment so when people come in, they realize that's what this church is about. But when they come in and see us sitting up here sleeping, they think this is a relaxation experience. They see us can't sing until we get our hands on the book. They think nobody here. So you got to create a whole different climate. Now here's what happened. After I had been in the church for a year and started preaching, then the learning that I had done helped. Big time. I was not learning it for that. I learned it for me. But because I learned it for me, God opened up an opportunity for me to teach it because I had learned it. But what would have happened if I had not learned it? Why would he open up that teaching opportunity for me? I don't know anything to teach. When I'd been in the church for 3 years, been preaching 2 years, I took my first church. I'm preaching for a church and only been in the church 3 years. Now that's a little too fast, and only been preaching 2 years. But see, you got to prepare yourself because you never know when an opportunity is going to open up. And when the opportunity to open up, you have to be ready. How many of you know the Les Brown story? Who knows the Les Brown story? I'm ashamed of you all. The Les Brown story took place right here in Miami. Who knows? Raise your hand. It's important enough for me to take a couple minutes and tell you. Les Brown needed a job. Everybody know who Les Brown is? Yes. Okay, Les Brown went to the radio station. He walked in and said, "Hi, I'm Les Brown. Do you need to hire a DJ?" He said, "No, we don't need a DJ." Now, Les Brown had been practicing at home. You know, those DJs got to talk that stuff. So he had all his lines down. He'd been practicing. He had read books and everything. His family would laugh at him. You ain't gonna never be no DJ. But he practiced. Went to the radio station. Guy said no. He went back the next day. "Hi, I'm Les Brown. You need a DJ?" He said, "Weren't you in here yesterday?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "No, I don't need anybody." He go back the third day. "Hi, I'm Les." He said, "No." He said, "Well, didn't I tell you yesterday I didn't need a DJ?" He said, "Well, I thought somebody might have quit or died." Okay. The fourth day, he goes right back in. He said, "Listen, man, I told you yesterday I don't need anybody. Don't come back in here anymore." Les Brown goes home, comes back the very next day. Persistence. And the man said, "Can you drive?" His first job at the radio station was picking up celebrities in Miami when they came to town to perform and didn't even have a driver's license. He said he drove down Ross all over Miami and didn't have a license at first. So he did not get the job as a disc jockey, but he got a job at the station because of his persistence. And he said, so he started running errands, go and get coffee and all this for the people who work at the station. And one Saturday, the disc jockey that was working was there by himself and Les was there. The disc jockey started drinking. So his speech got a little slurred. He said the station manager called to the station and said, "Les," said, "get on the phone and see if you can call some of the other disc jockeys to come in." Les said he waited a few minutes and called back and said, "Couldn't get nobody." He said, the man said, "Les, do you know how to operate the turntable?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you just put the records on and don't say anything. Just put the records on and play them." He said the guy kept on drinking. He said he called his family and said, "Take the stereo out on the porch. Les is fixing to come on the air." And he called everybody he knew, "Take your stereo out on the porch, turn the speakers up." He said in a few minutes, the disc jockey fell off out of the chair. He said he slid right in the chair. But now watch this. He'd already been practicing. So Les Brown is on the air. Now he could not have come on with the fanfare that he did had he not been ready with all of that stuff that he knows you do as a disc jockey. Now I'm not suggesting that you do it the way Les did it, but what I am saying is that when the opportunity avails itself, if you're not ready, so there are all kinds of opportunities and blessings that God opens up for us to get involved with, but we're not ready. We're doing him a disservice. We're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing the church a disservice because we are not prepared.
Yes, sir.
All right. Questions? I'm not fussing at you. I'm just passionate about what I do. Thank you. All right, any questions? Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Keep your blood flowing. Keep your blood flowing. Keep your blood flowing. Introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you and tell them something about yourself using the first letter in your name. Now, if on Sunday we would sing with the same level of enthusiasm that we greet people, our churches would just flourish. So tomorrow, I want you to sing with at least as much enthusiasm as you just stood up and greeted me. All right? Yes?
Brought up a real important facet about singing. We have hymn books, and like you said, sometimes we don't know the words, so we use the hymn books as a crutch. We also have notes and music. Those are there for a reason. What do you suggest on, different congregations? In Deerfield, we've tried to incorporate fundamentals of music to really help the congregation out. And that's what I've seen the church is kind of a little slack on, the music.
Let me say this. Listen to this carefully. Whatever you do it well. Sometimes which approach we take is not what's critical. Just do it well. Do it well. If you do it well, now, there's a church in Statesville, North Carolina called the Highland Acres Church of Christ. I've not been there in years. They had one of the elders who was an accomplished musician. They taught the whole church to sing by the music. If you went to the Highland Acres Church, if you were sitting on the back seat, the guy sitting on the back seat was singing just like the man on the front seat. Matter of fact, the song leader said to me one time, he said, if you give me any song with the music, he said, in 5 minutes we can sing it. They were good. They sung. Now, he believed that music spoke a universal language and ought to be the same everywhere. So they didn't allow any ad-libbing at all. Nothing of that. You got to sing this by the middle. All right? They did it well. There are churches. Well, let me take it right down the highway from you. Statesville was Carver Road Church of Christ. Adolphus Copeland taught music in high school. In fact, I think he's retired now, but he retired as a high school principal, I believe. Accomplished musician. Sung with the group called WCTS, I believe. I think he sung with it. But he was a director of the Carver Road Chorus. Accomplished musician. He did not subscribe to the philosophy that we ought to sing the songs by the music. He subscribed to the philosophy that we ought to sing how we feel. Yes. So you had two congregations, both in North Carolina. Both had dynamic singing worship experiences. But they did what they did well. Now, so on the local level, you have to decide whether you're going to sing Nights with Evan Pinion, the way it's written, Whether you want to get up and sing Kumbaya or whatever that song is, that's you. But whatever you do, you do it well. Do it well. And if I had to make a recommendation, I think we might want to do a mixture of those. I do think that it would help us to teach our people to read music. White people do that for practical purposes. It's good since we are going to be singing. If we're going to be in the Church of Christ, we're going to be singing from now on. At least I hope we're going to be singing from now on. Okay. So since it's something we're going to be doing from now on, we ought to learn something about the fundamentals. I was up in the Ozark Mountains doing a gospel meeting for some white churches up there. I preached in some cities where no black folk even live. And found out that their process every summer, they taught their children music. That was their summer curriculum, how to read music. Because I always wondered, how do these guys know how to read? I didn't know that. That was their curriculum. So during the summer, it was like standard procedure. They took that summer, and they taught how to read in the fundamentals of music. All right, let's move to page number 4. Other questions? Page 4. Now, yes.
You stated that you didn't like school, but now it seems that you learned the appreciation of learning. Where did that?
Well, I always like to learn. The reason I did not like school, I grew up on a farm. I'm a farmer by birth, concrete finishing bricklayer by trade. I wanted to farm. So I didn't see any reason why I need to sit in class all day long because I wanted to farm. That's what I wanted to do. That's what my daddy did. And so I look forward to farming. So I'd rather been out there farming than to be in class. But no farming school. Okay. Yes.
Let me follow up that question. You came from a focused family that was trained for learning, was indoctrinated with your mom, your dad, your siblings. We're dealing with Generation X now, where the mom was 13, 14, 15 when she had Junior. And she came from a family where her mom was 14, 15, and 16 when she was born. And I think that's part of the difficulty we're dealing with. Not only, I'm not a school teacher, I'm not even close to a school teacher, but I see the difficulties that teachers are having because the kids are not getting the proper nourishment at home, and then it hampers their learning ability. And I also see that when it's matriculated in the church. How do we, as leaders in the church now, try to reach out to those same
Excellent
children
question.
who come from the same background?
Excellent question. Any carpenters in here?
Any
Any carpenters in here? Any barbers in here? Any bricklayers in here? What do y'all do that? Y'all work. Anybody have their own business? What do you do?
I'm a glazing contractor.
A what?
Glazing, windows,
Okay.
storefront.
All right.
very good one.
Anybody else have their own business?
I do.
What do you do?
I sell shoes. Selling shoes.
Sell shoes. Your own business, you sell shoes? Anybody else?
I'm a tile man.
Tile?
Yeah.
Like floor tile?
Yeah.
Okay.
Teaching the diagram.
Now, we have to change the whole dynamic of the church. The whole dynamic. As a man, here's what you got to say. And interesting, I'm in the process now of developing a men's ministry called Manhandle It. And I'm developing chapters over the nation to do this very thing. I'd love to share it with you on another occasion. Here's the attitude a man has to have. Never do anything that a boy needs to know unless you have a boy on location learning it. So before you cut your grass on Saturday, you need to invite a boy over to show him how to cut grass. Before you change the oil in your car, you need to invite a boy in the community, a boy from the church, a boy in the community, a boy in the church who does not have a parent or dad in his life. Before you change your oil on Saturday, you need to call him over to the house and show him how to change oil. So you have to begin doing for him what his daddy will never do for him. So you need to take the children over to your house when you write your bills and show them how to write a check and balance the checkbook. So everything that you do, you need to open up to a boy or girl in this church, in the community, so they can see you do that. That's the only way we're going to change this. Now, we can talk about the daddies that ain't there. They ain't coming back, because you talk about it. Matter of fact, they didn't even hear you. We can talk about how young the mothers were when they have a baby. They're not going to stop. So what we have to do is we have to change the climate. So we got to begin thinking in turn. When I was growing up, I told you I was a farmer. I saw my daddy all day long, every day. So we got to do the very same thing. We got to bring children into the environment. So when you go out to sell shoes, you need to take somebody with you so they know how to sell shoes. And see, there are things that you learn by watching. My daddy was so honest. If he came to your house, if he came up in your driveway, if he saw a nickel in the yard, he'd pick it up and he'd give it to you when you came to the door. If you was not at home, he would leave it on your porch. Guess what? If I see money on the ground today, I don't pick it up. It ain't mine. It's not mine. Well, it's going to be, it's not mine. It's not mine. So whoever lost it might come back looking for it. It's not mine. So I don't pick up mine. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying, I'm telling you to tell you that the image I got from my daddy is so powerful, it lives. And so we've got to begin bringing children into our environment to learn. And what a difference we can make. Big, big difference. Big. Listen, you need to invite children home with you on Sunday. See, boys need to know what a real man does after he eats. Go to sleep. Listen, boys need to see. Now listen. Boys need to know how a man and his wife finally resolve what program we're going to watch it on TV. So they need to hear a man who loves his wife argue with her about what they're going to see on TV. He needs to see that. He needs to know how to navigate an argument with a woman.
Yes, sir.
After he gets married, he's going to have some arguments. He needs to learn how to navigate them.
You won't be married long.
So what?
You won't be married long. You just get another TV.
See, that's where the problem is going to come in. Because he can't afford another TV. So now they're arguing because they can't go to the mall and buy some shoes. So TV don't solve the problem.
Well, he should be out working then. If they can't afford it.
The point is, when you get married, if you got 19 TVs, you're going to have some arguments with your wife. He needs, so where does a boy learn how to argue with his wife at if his mom and dad ain't together? Where does he learn that at? Man, we don't argue like Bill Cosby. Man, you argue with your wife, you don't walk up and turn your back. Man, you don't do that stuff. And you don't resolve every argument in 3 minutes either with a big laugh. And you don't resolve that argument in 5 minutes and then all of a sudden, oh, honey, baby, let's go upstairs. You don't work like that. So he needs to know that. He needs to see a wife and a husband sitting over here pouting for a couple of minutes. He needs to see that. That's going to happen. So where does he see it? See, I grew up with a good mother and a good father. I mean, great people. My mama didn't get her way in everything. There were things I didn't even know that my daddy wouldn't allow. My daddy died at age 92 in 1998. My mom is 98 years old now, will be 99 July the 5th, and is really healthy. I grew up in a good, I did not know that my daddy did not allow my mama to have plants in the house. I didn't know that. We didn't have any plants in the house, but I didn't know. So that argument had been solved before I was born. So when my daddy died, people gave some plants. And I heard my mama say, I'm going to put this in the house if God can please with me. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So they didn't argue about it every day.
All right.
But she wanted a plant in the house, and now she put a plant in the house that we built with the money he left, and ain't nothing he say about that. When he died, we sold one of the farms he worked hard for and built my mama a brand new house, and the only thing that he can rule now is the space on the wall behind his picture. That's the only spot he covers now. And the rest of it, Annie is in charge. But what I'm saying is people need to come into your life and see how people do this. When are the young girls going to learn how to clean up a house? Their mama don't clean up. Listen, some of you have already had to do this because your daughters don't clean up. So you're having to show your granddaughters because their mama won't do it, even though you train them. So what I'm saying is the church has a golden opportunity. Now we can complain about what's going on in the community, or we can say, come on over here and we will show you. And so this church is known up in the community. You want your daughter to know how to cook? Send them over there. They got a cooking class at that church. So that's the kind of opportunity that is granted to us. Now the challenge is great. It's greater, but we have to find creative ways. Now what I was going to tell you about the business is we're trying to do this in Stone Mountain. We've got a couple of men who have businesses. So what we want to do is to get him to hire young boys in the summertime, and the church subsidize their salary. For example, he's not worth $8 an hour to you, but he's probably worth $4 an hour to you. And so we will pay the other $4. Now what that does is that puts a boy in a community with a man who has a work ethic. It puts him in the environment 8 hours a day with a man who isn't using profanity. So he's learning stuff. He learned how to be a man. And he's developing a work ethic. Now he doesn't know that the church is subsidizing it. He thinks he's paying it. So since he thinks he's paying it, he's making $8 an hour. Man, he knows he can't make that kind of money anywhere else. So he can yell at him. He'll get on the stick. Now, what parents have to do is, if you work in the factory, you can't take your children with you. So you have to go hire your children and subsidize theirs. Now, don't tell them that you're subsidizing it, because if they know daddy paying them, they won't act like daddy paying them. They need to think that they're being paid by him. Listen, you're going to buy their school clothes and all of this, so just make them say what you're going to be giving them. You make them earn it. So you go out and find somebody and put them to work. So there's all kind of creative ways we can do. And so what we have to do is have to begin doing that. So the church has to begin looking at itself as a learning institution. All right, get back to number 4 here now. Who am I? Who am I? Now the reason people do not get into teaching sometimes is we do not realize who we are. Who am I? Let's answer that question. I am a new creation. Because see, when we raise up, who am I to be teaching? And we think, oh, I probably shouldn't be teaching, I don't know enough. And so we start making all kinds of excuses, etc. So who am I? I'm a new creation. I am a new creation in Christ. At first, I was sin-stained, but now I'm blood-washed. Look at the person sitting next to you and said, I'm blood-washed.
I'm blood washed.
See, the next time somebody bring up to you about your sins, just look at them and say, yeah, but I'm blood-washed now. See, I understand all that liquor we used to drink. I understand all that, but I'm blood-washed now. So you got to begin to see, you are blood-washed. Blood-washed. So how do you see yourself? All right, so who am I? I am blood-washed. I'm a new creation in Christ, blood-washed. Who am I to teach? Now, not who am I to be teaching, but who am I to be a teacher? Because, see, that's a mindset we have. Who am I? I only went to the 3rd grade. Who am I? Who am I to be teaching? I am God's workmanship. I'm God's workmanship. And that word workmanship comes from the Greek word that's translated into our English word as poem. What is a poem? Synchronized words. See, a poem requires skill and strategy. You're God's poem. You're God's poem. That's that word. You're what God has skillfully crafted and put together. You're not some junk. And then we take poems and set them to music. They become songs. You're God's poem. Look at the person sitting next to you and say, I'm God's poem. Listen, you know what that means? That means you are what God has been saying. I am who God has been saying. I am God's poem. And you're somebody. You're God's poem. What do we do with our poems? How many of you know Sister Minnie Leonard? Sister Minnie Leonard in Orlando wrote a book of poems entitled, it's a book called This Old House. I published that book for her. That's her treasured writings. You're God's poem. You are God's treasured sayings. You are God's treasured sayings that he has skillfully, strategic. Well, I don't feel like that. It doesn't matter. That's who you are. You are his poem. See, on any day your self-esteem is deflated, just kind of get up and say, I'm God's. I don't know what you're saying about me, but I'm God's poem.
Yeah.
I am God's. All right, I am God's ambassador. See, Moses felt unworthy and incapable of teaching. Now, here's something I want you to understand. Look at me, look at me. Now, if you buy this concept, you won't have any trouble teaching. God has chosen you to teach, not in spite of your impediments, but because of your impediments. He has chosen you to teach because you used to be a drunk. He has chosen you to teach because you used to be a thug. He has chosen you to teach because you used to be a prostitute. He has chosen you to teach because it did take you so long to get it together. Because of that. Because see, now you're the only person that can understand what the person is going through that has that struggle. In earlier days, I decided I wanted to be a drug counselor. And it dawned on me. I grew up a Gentile. You'll get that on the way home. And you may say all Gentile ain't left. But what I am saying, I grew up in a sheltered, to some degree, environment. I've never used drugs. I drank enough liquor to kill all of us, but I never did a little marijuana. Didn't know how to inhale. But crack and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, I have never seen crack nor cocaine. Never seen it. Wow. Never ever seen it. If I did, I know I looked at it. But it dawned on me to be a drug rehabilitation counselor. I think you're in a better position if you are a recovery. That's right. And so when it dawned on me, I don't have enough experience in the real world to really help people. So I moved from out of that area. So God has chosen you because of your impediments. Because of your impediment now, you ain't gonna never take the credit. You know it was God that did it. You know it was God. You don't take credit for it. Because you know, I ain't smart enough to do that. See, I don't take credit. All the things that I'm telling you, I don't take any credit for that because I know I ain't smart enough to do that. Not even close. God has maneuvered me through life experiences. I don't know why I didn't get to you. I don't know how he protected me. I don't understand that. But he did it for a purpose. All kind of treacherous stuff. I have a pistol that I own today that I bought to kill a man with. I don't know, but God protected me. I didn't kill him. And he's still living. And he looks after my mom. He doesn't know I bought this pistol 40 years ago. Bought it to kill him. Over a gambling debt. But there was a 7-day wait. I'm so glad for that. I didn't know there was a 7-day wait. But he didn't pay me. I said, you be when I get back. I went and bought the pistol. And had to leave the place empty-handed because I couldn't take it. The 7-day wait. So I didn't even go back. I went on home. After a week, I decided to let him live. He does electrical work for my mother this day. I'm going to tell him that one day. What I'm saying is, So I understand how people can let anger get the better of them. That helped me when I wrote my book, Good and Angry. I understand that. So God has chosen you. So your deficiencies and defectivenesses do not invalidate you from being a teacher. Now that is once you have begun to get a grip on that.
Yeah.
Once you begin to master, get a grip on that. So don't ever get up and say, well, you know, they know how I used to be, so no, I ain't gonna get, no, Don't take that position. All right, so Moses tried, who am I? Who am I to teach anyone? Your students are former sin-stained, but they are now blood-washed. Or they are still sin-stained and they need to be blood-washed. They are new creations and ambassadors, or they need to become. Who am I to teach anyone anything? I am to teach the knowledge and wisdom of God. And I am teaching the knowledge and wisdom of God so that believers can live out their covenant commitment to the corporate vision through the local church. William Glasser, psychologist, said we learn 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we discuss, 80% of what we experience, and 95% of what we teach. Now let me tell you something. You're never going to learn as much as you ought to learn until you start teaching. Now listen to that. You're never going to learn as much as you ought to learn until you start teaching. So if you take the position that I'm not going to teach because I have not learned, it is teaching that helps you. You will never get to where you need to be until you start teaching. Teaching is part of God's system that enhances your learning. Questions? Yes.
In the, where you preach, and you, the teachers that are at your facility, at your establishment, congregation, how do you determine their teaching ability to teach within the congregation? Is it by certification? A certain amount of classes, like you go to Harvard, you go to university, what have you. What determines that individual to be able to teach adequately in your
Good question. Here's what I think will help every church. You select your curriculum, and then you teach your teachers how to teach that curriculum. Because different curriculums need to be taught differently. So when you select a curriculum, you need to the extent you can, get into the mindset of the developer of that curriculum and get them to see if they provide some type of mechanism that teaches teachers how to teach this. Now, in our last session, I'm going to spend some time teaching you how to teach blueprints. Blueprints is a curriculum that I have produced. And Deerfield here is using it. If you're in a congregation that does not use it, it'll still help you as you process that. I recommend you start using it. But nevertheless, I'll teach you how to use that particular curriculum. Now, when you teach your teachers how to use this particular curriculum, then we need to begin observing our teachers so we can help them become better teachers. We have to begin observing our teachers so we can help them. So you need to have regular teaching sessions. Now, one of the things that I want to do is develop what I call Bible School University. And that is within some period of time, we will do a webinar for all of the churches over the nation that's using the Blueprints curriculum. Let's say once a quarter, by webinar, I will do a teacher training to keep the people up to par on their teaching. Now, any public school teachers in here? Now, in the public school system, every now and then they will change curriculum. They will send the teachers to be trained on how this curriculum is to be taught, and also on how to achieve the objectives of this curriculum. That's why the teachers in Atlanta changed those grades. They wanted to look good and didn't teach the children and learn how to water from that. But they said, okay, our criteria is different. So that needs to become a part of our learning process. And that will help make a world of difference. When I worked for the telephone company for AT&T, AT&T at that time had become the world's largest corporation. Here's how they did it. If you needed training, they would send you to training. They believe that we get to be who we are by getting our people trained. So people need to be trained. There may be Bible school training sessions in this area. I don't know. There's a Southeastern Bible school workshop that takes place every year. It's been happening. It's the first Saturday in November. First Saturday in November. And it had been being in Columbia, South Carolina. Now this year it's going to Winston-Salem. Now, I know that's a distance away, but it's worth it. It's great. As a matter of fact, eventually, as we get enough churches using blueprints, we will do an annual training session where people can work and learn how to best to teach and communicate that. So we actually need an education department in the Church of Christ.
Amen.
Every other major religious group has their own publishing house. Church of God in Christ people, they don't have to go somewhere else and buy curriculum. It's all right there and there. And they've made sure it teaches their theological understanding. The Baptists got theirs, the Methodists have theirs. We're the only somebody running around without that type of clarity. So they know, and they have people who are proficient in doing and developing that. And so it's time for us to do that as well. Not because they're doing it, but because that's a good process to follow. All right? Everybody take your deep breath. Everybody take your deep breath. Hold your left arm up in the air. Now, everybody, repeat after me. Spot. 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 What do you do at a green light?
Stop.
Stop. Go.
Go.
You, my friend, have been programmed. And we have been misprogrammed. What that exercise does is show you how quickly you can be programmed. Every last one of you know you don't stop at a green light. But in 3 seconds, you were misprogrammed. We have been programmed. Misprogrammed. So to get our churches where we need to get there, we got to reprogram. We got to reprogram. We got to reprogram. All right. The purpose. Now we spent what we've done up to this point. We have done that to help prepare you as a teacher. So that's to prepare yourself. Now we're going to talk about presenting yourself.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When we talk about teaching, as we grow through life, we're always teaching. So what's the big difference? Because us girls, women who were single mothers, we had to teach our sons to wash, clean, cook, and do those things. And our men who had girls that they raised single, they still had to teach them and then do their hair and that type of thing. So how does it differ what we're teaching now? Because you're learning, you're teaching as you're going along in your life.
I agree with you. What's your question?
But you're still going to teach. My question is, how is it going to be any different? Is it something that we have to change in our mind because of how we teach at home, or how we've been teaching as you're talking to people, going through the Bible with them, or is it something different how we have to teach?
If you look at, as a teacher, if you look at your students, whatever environment in which you're teaching, say, are my students effectively grasping what I'm teaching? If they're doing that, you're doing well, okay. But if for some reason you discover that they aren't getting it as well as I would like for them to get it, then you have to back up and adjust your teaching process. For example, if a teacher is teaching math and all of her students are passing, she keeps doing what she's doing. But if 40% of her students are failing, she probably needs to change what she's doing. If parents are training their children and your children are doing responsibly the things that you're training them, you're probably doing okay the way you're doing it. But if the things that you need your children to be doing, they're doing none of them. For example, if you want your children to straighten up their room and they never straighten up their room, you got to change your training process some type of way. So you look at, am I getting out of these students responsibly what I expect to get? And that's how you evaluate as to whether or not the process and the procedure I'm using is working. So when it comes to the church Bible school department, we ask ourselves, are the members behaving the way we want them to behave? Are they gaining the Bible knowledge that we want them to gain? If they are, keep doing what you're doing. If they're not, you got to change something in an effort to try to get there, or you have to begin to explore what are the factors that's impeding and hindering us from getting to where it is that we're trying to get. So what I need to do, okay? All right, everything that you learn, teach it to someone, because teaching reinforces your learning. Now, everybody look at me right now. Everybody look at me. Please, do this one. Don't read down the paper, because there's a little test I'm going to give you. Don't go ahead of me, okay? If you've already gone there, please don't go ahead of me reading. Because I usually do this on the overhead so I can hide the rest of it from you so you can get it. But if you've already read it, here's what I want you to do. I want you to cover up everything except line 1. Just fold your paper up to everything except line 1. Don't look at it yet. And I'll give you about 10 seconds. I want you to look at that and see if you can read that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Who's memorized those letters? Stop. Everybody look up. Anybody memorize those letters that quick?
Yeah.
You did? Huh? Did you go down below it?
No.
Oh, you wrote it. Okay, you went ahead. All right. Now, go down to number 4. It really works better if I do it over here. It won't work so well on paper. Go down to number 4. Those letters, that's what they say. The sun was hot, but the old man did not get his hair. Now, what's the lesson in that? Listen, if I gave you those lessons, those letters all jumbled up, what does that do? That interferes with your learning. When I break them up into the words that they make up, it helps your learning. Yes. So here's what teaching is. teaching puts information into parameters so that the students can conscientiously grasp it, and conscientiously apply it. So now here's what you begin to think of as a teacher. You're going to take information. Anybody teach anything other than Bible? Anybody teach seminars? What do you teach?
Application security. Application security.
What's application security?
Software development and
Okay. Anybody else teach nursing? What teaching does, you put information into parameters so that your students can understand it, consciously grasp it, conscientiously apply it. So if your students are not able to conscientiously apply it, you've got to back up and say, did I put this information into the parameters where they can get it? How do I put this information into the parameters so they can get it? Anybody here know Spanish? Anyone here know French? German? See, if you take the lesson and put it in German, and your students are English speaking, who get it? Watch this. 2 plus 2 plus 3, a third grader can get it. If you say 2 plus x plus 4 equal, he may not get it. So even in math, you end up getting all of your factors on one side of the equal sign so you can work the problem. You reduce the fraction to this lowest common denominator. Some of y'all ain't heard that in a long time, have you? I ain't heard that in a long time. So you can grasp it. You know, you can't divide 1/4 by 1/16 until you get a common denominator. You have to put it in a parameter where it is maneuverable. So as a teacher, so what you're simply doing as a teacher is putting the information in the parameters so that your students can consciously grasp it and conscientiously apply it. So what we're simply doing is taking biblical information, putting it in a parameter so that the student can do something with it. That's what it's about. So if I want you to memorize these letters, if I put it in this parameter, it's going to interfere. If I put it in number 2, it's going to interfere. If I put it in number 3, but if I put it in number 4, you can get it quickly. So the question that teachers must ask, am I putting information into the parameter where my students can get it? So you cannot automatically assume that the problem is with my student. It may be with me teaching. Everybody take a deep breath. When I preached in North Carolina, we had worship first and then Sunday school. I taught my new converts. Every Sunday, the first 10 or 15 minutes of Sunday school, we would review my sermon that I just preached. So one Sunday morning, in Sunday school, I asked a question. The first person I directed a question to could not answer. It was about the sermon. Directed it to another person, they couldn't answer. Eventually, one student said, Brother Marshall, said, I didn't understand nothing you taught this morning. And guess what? Shortly, every student in my class admitted they did not understand anything I taught. And the reason they didn't, I started the sermon off defining a word that they never understood the definition, and so the rest of the whole sermon they were lost. I did not put the information in the parameter where they could get it. I did not put the information in the parameter where they could consciously grasp it and conscientiously apply it, because they cannot apply what they have not understood. And it was not their fault. When I went back over the definition and explained it differently, every student got it. So as a teacher, teaching is really about simplifying the lesson. Teaching is not about complicating the lesson.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
The objective in teaching is to simplify it. Now, I know in every class you have some advanced people, and you need to give them some things to kind of challenge them so they aren't lost totally. But teaching is really about simplifying so that you can grasp it. So therefore, as a teacher, you must train yourself to think at the level of your students. When I lived in Jackson, Tennessee, I was in Atlanta doing a gospel meeting for the West End Church with Wester Brown. And it just so happened it was career day. So one of the ladies had asked me, said, would you come to our school and talk to our students? So I went, and there was professional people from everywhere there. And we were talking to preschool. What age is preschool?
3 to 5.
What's above it? Kindergarten?
Kindergarten. 3 to 4.
Who's right before the first grade? What's that group called? Kindergarten. Kindergarten, I think. There was a probation officer in our group. So I got to think, how can I talk to kindergartners about what I do preaching? How can I get this down to what they do? So I'm agonizing, how do I gonna get this? Because it's about what you do as a career person. So the guy before me was a probation officer. He wasn't accustomed to talking to kindergartners either. So he was talking to him, and he said, do what's right and obey your parents and obey the law. He said, because if you don't, you can end up getting incarcerated. And I'm saying, I think, see, he's accustomed to talking to people who understand, and so it becomes a challenge to simplify the information. You have to get on the level, you have to get some awareness of where the students are. Because it's about putting the information in the parameters where they can understand it. Now, what helps you to do that better is if you spend time with the people you're going to be teaching. Or you do something that helps you understand the dynamic of the people you're teaching. Now, let me give you John Marshall, chapter 2, verse 4. I believe that one of the reasons why God has required elders to have a faithful wife helps her husband put what the church is doing in the parameter where the women can understand and get it. She explains the women for her husband. A faithful wife explained women for their husband. Take your deep breath. Why does he need faithful children? His faithful children will explain the younger generation for their dad. Let me illustrate that. For our youth, once a month after the morning services, we do an information session. And then we take them out to eat or whatever, and that kind of thing. So this Sunday, I decided we're going to feed them pizza. All children like pizza. So I said to them, the youth coordinators are going to have their session, and I'm going to stay over and just kind of see what you guys are doing. And then I said to one of the mothers, I said, I want you to stay. And about halfway through the session, I want you to go get the pizza. She said, Brother Marshall, they don't want to eat pizza here. They want to go to Pizza Hut. It had never crossed my mind. Young folk prefer to go to Pizza Hut than to bring the pizza. I thought I'd be doing them a favor, bring the pizza here. And so I said to the students, I said, no, we don't want no pizza here. Their mother, who was closer in touch with the teenagers, explained them for me. And because I listened to what she had to say, we took them to Pizza Hut, had a wonderful time, and we got back to the church building, and they still like their preacher. But if I had made them eat pizza, now they would have eaten it. But what I'm saying is that helped me to put this whole experience in a parameter. Let me give you another. How many of you know David Jones, a preacher in Nashville, Tennessee? David Jones said this once in a workshop. He said he came home one Christmas. He came home and laid on the kitchen table. He has 2 children, a boy and a girl. He laid on the kitchen table tickets. We're going to Jamaica for Christmas. And the children said, do we have to go? He thought, ungrateful children. I can work hard and their daddy gonna take them. Do we have? I cannot believe this. And so his wife pulled him aside and said, remember, all summer long, we went with you in traveling. We've lived in hotels and out of a suitcase. The children and all of us, we want to enjoy the house. Yeah. She helped him to understand where the family was. If you're going to be an effective teacher, you need a representative in the group of people that you're going to be teaching, so that you can put the information in the parameters where they can get it. The United States Army has a department called Civil Affairs. Anybody been in the Army here? Man, what do y'all do down here? Do you know, simplify, Air Force, man, Air Force. Do you know that if the United States was going to bomb Panama, do you know who are the first people to go in before we go in and drop bombs? Civil Affairs. Civil Affairs go into the city and find out where the cemeteries are, where are the holy spots, so we don't bomb them. That's the first thing we do, because the government does not want to inflame people, because people become really inflamed. Man, you bomb the cemeteries. And there's a policy. We're not supposed to bomb cemeteries and sacred spots and sacred places. Sometimes that happens, but by design, we're not supposed to. So then what Civil Affairs come back and then say to the military generals, here are the parameters that you can now send your bombs into. Because don't send it over here, because these are holy monuments over here. So knowing what's going on in the dynamic of the people that you're going to be teaching will help you tremendously. Because as a teacher, you've got to do what? Place the information in the parameters so they can get it. Anybody have a bird feeder in your yard? And we're going to find out something. Anybody ever pick cotton? Nobody ever pick cotton down here. Man, I'm going to hang out with you after this is over. Man, I don't know about these folks up here. What's your name in the back? What? Joan. Okay, we can hang out, man. He knows. Where you from?
Jacksonville.
They raised cotton up there?
Georgia and Alabama.
Oh, you went across the state line. Okay, all right. All right. My dad had so much by the time we picked ours, we didn't have time for nobody else. But getting the information so that they can get it. Crucial. Birds. Some birds eat feed from different types of settings. So if you're going to feed the birds, you need to know what type of bird feeder works for robin, what types work for a crow, or whatever type of bird you're trying to draw. So as a teacher, what type of information, how do I place this so that student can get it? All right, any questions? Page 6. Go through this quickly, but you need to read this slowly and massage this. Teaching to the conscious mind. There is a conscious component of our mind. The conscious mind receives, reviews, and retains a small portion of the data. But then there is a subconscious component. It receives, reviews, and retains all of the data. Do you realize that every piece of information that has ever come to your conscious awareness is lodged into your subconsciousness? That's why hypnosis sometimes can bring out things. It's there. Yeah. It's just like your computer hard drive. Everything you put on there is on there. They say even when you erase it, it's still on there. It's there. Now you might have put it over into a compartment where you can't find it. You can't recall it. But it's there. Have you ever tried to think of something, couldn't think of it, and thought of it later? Yeah. It wasn't out of your mind. It was just in your subconscious mind, and it took a while for it to come to the surface. Have you ever looked for a letter or receipt, couldn't find it, and later on stumbled upon it?
Yes, sir.
It was in the house all along. It just was not in a parameter where you could recall it. So memorization has a lot to do with placing information in files where you can recall it. So the information is there. Okay? Information is there. So there's a conscious mind, subconscious mind. And then there is the conscious mind. C-O-N-S-C-I-E-N-C-E. What this part of the mind does, receives, reviews, retains the information that you add moral and ethical value to. See, there's some information, it's neutral. If I knew how old Brother Ward is, if I don't, it's not a problem. It's not a right or wrong, it's just generic information. Okay? It has no significance. No significance for all practical purposes. But information that's in our conscious mind, we have ethical value. So when you are teaching, that's the portion you are teaching. Now you got to get the information in their conscious mind, but I am teaching this person so they will add ethical value to the information. So if they see this, for example, if you're teaching your students to be fair, and they never see fairness as a virtue, you're teaching them to have a work ethic, and they never see working to have any ethical value, what do they do with your information? Nothing. Nothing. So you got to I'm teaching to the conscious mind. So I'm building up the conscious. See, the conscious mind impacts behavior. Listen, there are things that you are aware of, but you don't do anything about it. It may be in your conscious mind, but not your conscious mind. But if it gets into your conscious mind, even if you violate it, there's something that bothers you when you do. So that's what you're teaching to. You're teaching. So teaching, in other words, what you're doing, you are teaching your students to subscribe to the value system. Now, sometimes you hear people say this, well, I'm going to let my children grow up and make up their own mind. Listen, to say I'm going to let my children grow up and make up their own mind is to say that your mind has no value. Listen, even if there were some other good options, you ought to at least give your children the one good option that you have subscribed to. For example, if you use Bank of America, there may be some other good banks. But you ought at least expose your child to Bank of America if it's a good bank for you, even if there are some other good ones, I agree. Or if it's a process, I expose my children to one good process, even if I leave it up to them to select one of the others. For example, I can tell you how to get to Bradenton, Florida. That's where I came from. I came down 75. That's a good trip. But there's other ways. So I don't say, well, I ain't going to tell you nothing. I'm going to let you figure it out yourself. So that don't make sense. Now, if I tell you how to go on Interstate 75, and then you at least have one, and then when you go the other route, you might decide it's better for me to go this route. But at least I gave you one good one. To give you nothing is to handicap you. So if parents take the position that I'm not going to give my children a good way of doing it, you handicap them. So don't hesitate to give them a good way of doing this. Good way of solving problems. Good way of doing this. If they find a better way, but at least they have one good one at least. All right? Any questions? All right. So you're teaching to the conscious mind. So that means you aren't just placing information in your children, in your students. You are placing information in there and making a recommendation that this is what you ought to do. Right? This is what you ought to do. This would be a good way of doing it. Now, if you find some better ways, but here's at least one good way. To not give them a good way. That's like not telling them how to work a math problem. Just figure it out yourself. Give them at least one good way. If you give them one, if you count on your fingers, at least they got one way of getting with it. There used to be a thing, they had some balls on it. What's the thing called?
Abacus.
Abacus? If you use the abacus, at least you give them one way. They might find out later it's better to do this with a calculator, but at least you've given them one way. But to leave them with no way, just figure it out, doesn't make sense. But that's how a lot of people think. They think that if I give them one way and subscribe to one way, it'll mess them up later. Won't mess them up at all. My daddy taught me about putting money in the bank in a savings account. You get about 2% interest. That's one way. He didn't know anything about mutual funds. But now if he hadn't told me anything about how to save, I'd have been walking around with money at home under a pillow. So at least, so you're teaching. So do not hesitate to recommend. As a matter of fact, if you cannot recommend what you're teaching, stop teaching. You need to recommend it, even if you have to say sometimes to your students, I didn't do this, but this is what I should have done. Not really doing it now like I ought to, but I ought to be doing it. So I can recommend to you. You can say to a person, you can say to your children, you ought to change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles. Now, sometime I go 5, but you ought to change it. I ought to change it every 3. So what we have to learn to do is to recommend, give good advice, even if we don't subscribe to it ourselves. Now, I need to talk about this for my because some of the bad years being a hypocrite. See, I knew you were going to say that. So now I got to explain to you what a hypocrite is. All right, let me explain what a hypocrite Anybody didn't have to go to the movies? So y'all already know. People who go to the movies love, you're going to see a good hypocrite. That's what you do when you go to the movie.
Repeat that.
When you go to the movie, you're going to see a good hypocrite. If he's not a good hypocrite, you don't want to go to that movie. The word hypocrite comes from the word from which we get our English concept, play actor. The actor in a movie. So what does an actor do? When, who did the Ali? Who did Ray Charles? Who was that fellow?
Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx. So what Jamie Foxx did, studied Ray Charles. So in the movie, he disguised, at least this was his objective, or should have been his objective, he disguised his image of Jamie Foxx and act like Ray Charles.
Yes, sir.
That's what movies are designed to do. Okay? So the word hypocrite means I abandon my true identity and assume the identity of another person. That's where we get the word hypocrite. It comes from the theater. It's a theatrical term. So when Jamie Foxx disguised Jamie Foxx and then look like and act like Ray Charles, he's being a hypocrite, play actor. Now watch this. So Jamie Foxx, he's Jamie Foxx. Doesn't matter what he does, he's Jamie Foxx. That's who he is. Okay? So when he acts like Ray Charles, he's hypocrite. When he goes back to acting like Jamie Foxx he's not being a hypocrite. He's not being a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite when he's over here.
Yes, sir.
When he's acting like Ray Charles. When he acts like Jamie Foxx, guess what? He's not a hypocrite. Now watch this. What's your name? Cornelius. Can I use you in this illustration?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You won't get mad at me?
No, sir.
Well, let me use me. John Marshall. New creation, ambassador in Christ. So that's who I am. That's my identity. So when I come to church and worship and serve the Lord, I'm not being a hypocrite. That's who I am. That's who I am. But now when I go over to the club tonight and cut up,
Yes, sir.
that's not who I am. When I go down to the gambling parlor, I'm a hypocrite. So when I come in church tomorrow, I'm not hypocrite. I'm hypocrite today. So when people are not doing what they should do, when they come to church, we say, hey, ain't nothing but a hypocrite. Yeah, but his church behavior is not when he's hypocrite. He's hypocrite when he's doing the other behavior. See, Jamie Foxx is a hypocrite when he's acting like Jamie Foxx. He's hypocrite when he acts like Ray Charles. So we look up and say, man, I can't believe Brother Bryant passed communion. He ain't nothing but a hypocrite. He ain't got no business passing communion. No, Brother Bryant ain't got no business out there gambling. That's when the hypocrite. When it comes to worship, that's not the hypocrite. The hypocrite is out here. So what we do is let the devil give us the opposite perspective. And we make people feel so bad.
Yes, no, no.
Yeah.
I've even seen people get up and walk out of church. They wouldn't even take communion because somebody was passing communion. They thought, what am I?
Well,
I did a gospel meeting one time and I was staying in some folks' house. True story. And their daughter was staying there. Daughter hadn't been to church in 7 years. So that morning at breakfast, Mama tapped me around there and she was trying to get me to get on her daughter and get her back to church. And she was beating up her daughter and she wanted me to help beat her up too. And so finally the daughter said, Marsha, what do you think about people who go to church and don't take communion? Now back in those days, I answered questions quickly and painfully. So I said, go to church. And I said, what happened? I said, they went to the bathroom or something, communion was passing. They said, no, one thing about a person, go to church, and they just don't ever take communion. I said, for 7 months? No, you don't take communion. Well, I just waited right in there. Had no idea it was her mom.
Wow.
Her mom had gone to church for 7 months and refused to take communion. But now she wants me to help her beat up her daughter who's been out of church for 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And the reason she quit taking communion, she was working with the youth. They took the youth on a trip, didn't put any oil in the engine, tore up the engine on the bus. So the men decided she can't take the children on any more youth trips. Her husband was supposed to have told her, he didn't. So she planned another trip and got the trip planned. He said, oh, by the way, you don't have the youth anymore, you can't do that. So she was mad. So she got mad at the church and wouldn't take communion for 7 months.
Oh, wow.
Now, she was hypocrite when she sit here as a child of God and won't take communion. Because taking communion is identified with what a believer ought to be doing. So, don't drive people back over to being a hypocrite. Now, I am not teaching you to be a hypocrite. I'm telling you, you should not be a hypocrite. But I am also telling you, you should never take half of your life to recover. Peter denied Jesus, and in less than 50 days, he was the chief spokesperson. Now, y'all like Brother Ward, but if y'all find out he's downtown denying Jesus, he ain't preaching here next month. We won't let him recover, not in 50 days. We're going to put him on probation for a long time. Right. Yeah, we'll put him on probation for a long time. You know, Jesus didn't hold folk out for probation like that. You ever realize how serious it was for Peter to say, I don't know the man? I don't even know him. 3 times. I don't know him. But he was the chief spokesperson on the day of Pentecost. So if Brother Ward gets drunk and has a DUI, how long are you going to make him wait before you preach again? No, go out there and drink now. See, now, I am not suggesting that we ought to be, but what I am saying, we ought to be in the business of repairing people quickly.
Yes.
Well, isn't that the brother that, isn't that the one that stole some, he named in the paper 2 years ago, wasn't it? 2 years? He shouldn't have stolen, shouldn't have done whatever it was. But how long is it going to be before he recovers? We ought to pride ourselves in restoring people quickly. See, we ought to have the same attitude with other people we do with our children. When you punish your children, aren't you so glad when you can take them off of punishment?
Yes.
Amen.
Are you glad when you can take other people off of punishment?
Yes.
See, that's how it ought to be. I'm so glad my son is doing the right thing, so I have to keep him on punishment. I'm so glad my daughter's doing the right thing, so I have to keep him on punishment. And then turn right around and say, man, I want to keep you on punishment a long time. Now, that's the wrong attitude. Got to say hand somewhere. Yes.
People, it's not supposed to be like that in the church where people continue to hold what somebody did, but that's just the way of people thinking. And
We got to
I
change
was
our
just
whole
saying,
climate
like,
and culture.
The church is a hospital, so
Exactly
it's
correct.
constantly correcting itself, but it is, I've been in the church for a long time, and that thinking is still, and even though that you may have done some things before you became a Christian, if they know that you've
And
done
even
those
after
things,
becoming a Christian.
yeah, if they know those things, they still would throw that up. You would hear something, and it's like profound, like, why would you even say that? Because that person is a Christian, you know, it's different. It's just
See, what you have to learn to do
something
is never allow your past to hinder what you need to be doing now. A couple of weeks from now, I'll be doing an anger management seminar in Jackson, Tennessee. Stop the violence. They're having so many murders in my hometown. I'm going back and doing a Stop the Violence seminar. Now, guess what? somebody might jump up and say, man, all the people you pull out of raise on, you in here talking about, yeah, I'm the same little thug that's running around here raising ruckus 40 years ago.
Yes, sir.
But I'm back over there now trying to help y'all minimize some of that ruckus.
Yes, sir.
See, I'm not embarrassed to go back, even though I intend to kill a man once there. I'm not embarrassed to go back.
All right.
I'm not embarrassed. I'm not. Whatever folk want to say about what I did, it doesn't bother me a bit. I'm going to go back and try to help. Because, see, I understand the mentality. See, I understand how a person who was raised in a good family and a good home can allow a moment of anger. If you don't use good judgment, you do something that is crazy. My parents didn't train me to do that stuff. My parents would have been so embarrassed. We train you in a moment of failing to think. So my seminar helps people to overcome. How do you deal with your anger? So you gotta take all that into consideration. Now let's take any questions. Everybody stand up. We'll take a question when we sit down. Everybody stand up. We started a few minutes late, so we're gonna hold you. Can everybody stay with us for 60 more minutes?
Yeah.